and the newsworthy events of the week. We have as focal points today, Cameroon surviving the COVID-19. It is a pertinent question there which we shall be raising and reflecting on. But also we have papers on the newsstands this week. Let's take a listen on what the papers have to say. This week, a few copies made mention of school resumption, the interministerial committee meeting, as well as updates on the coronavirus in Cameroon. We begin with Cameroon Tribune, which one of its copies this week captioned, "The fight against the COVID-19, school children resume school," as ordered by government authorities, but with the strict respect of barrier measures to fight the COVID-19. But also inside the revised 2020 state budget, the fighting against COVID-19 among priorities mentioned, as according to an ordinance signed by the head of state on June 3rd, 2020, funds in the National Solidarity Fund dedicated to minimize the pandemic stand at over 180 billion CFA francs. The initial budget has thus moved from 4,951 billion to about 4,400 billion now. We take on L'Heure du Sahel also on the newsstands this week. It evokes the COVID-19 fight in the southern regions of the country. This far, 11 persons have lost their lives as a result of the health pandemic. But what is the situation of health centers in Adamawa? We identify a few hitches via this copy of your paper, which as well tells us about some stretches of road totally abandoned, which are almost out of use. Situations there decried by the local population in Gaoundéré. Le Jour comes to evoke the fight against the coronavirus till a few Cameroonians testify. Mutation Quotidien, COVID-19 in Cameroon, an era to break and shatter couples' lifestyle or not. This copy of Mutation Quotidien questions how couples live at this point in time when social distancing is imposed by the health regulations of the World Health Organization as well as the state. But also inside, the Wazizi affair is mentioned. The COVID-19 effect on Cameroon's budget is also outlined. Realite Plus on its part takes us to the west region of the country. Sensitization keeps on in the Kunki, where sanitary kits have been distributed by the Mayor David Kenyi to schools, given that classes resumed this June 1st across the country. Similarly with La République Press, which gives us updates about the kit distribution in a bid to preserve school children, pupils, students in examination classes as they resume school. Others which were recalled this week by the Prime Minister Head of Government, Chief Dr. Joseph John Guti, to school heads, so as to preserve kids from the killer virus. Le Messager takes another twist to give us updates. After his death, Photo Victor, his descendants seem to tear apart. Esingang focuses on its main caption, the death of Samuel Wazizi, the truth behind his arrest and even his death is mentioned on page 3 of this copy, Esingang this week. Besides this are a number of papers we had on newsstands this week. Once again, welcome on Reflection. Welcome back. Thanks a lot for joining us to this reflection on Info Television. And we have guests. We told you we'll begin with you, Professor Tita Samuel, former national chairman of the Cameroon's People's Party. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us on Reflection.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
How is the party faring?
Well, we're working hard and getting on well.
That's good to know. Beside you, we have Full Godfrey, political analyst of the CPDM party. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, madam, and I'm very happy to be invited once more here this evening, and I'll send my greeting to all my collaborators and all the Muslims in Cameroon.
Okay, and how is Cameroon faring? Because you're the mouthpiece of the CPDM today.
Yes, I think nobody can. I think we are in Cameroon and we know what is going on now, and how the government is struggling to see how things are to move. Even though we are in a war.
Thank you so much for passing by. Beside you, we have Fabrice Lena, National Communications Secretary of the Popular Action Party. It is the first time we are receiving you. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Hermine Ilouga. Good afternoon, Cameroonians. Good afternoon to all viewers of Infotv television. It's a pleasure to be invited to this noble program. Thank you so much.
And with you all, gentlemen, we shall be digging inside the news this week. Let's get to find out what made news this week in Cameroon.
The reopening of schools for the examination classes started this June 1st, 2020, both in primary and secondary schools in Cameroon. The Secretary of State, Dr. Ashirikilo Vivian, and in partnership with the UNICEF, goes down the field to expect the effectiveness of the reopening of examination classes in the government primary English school, Etugebe. The lady of the field, Dr. Ashirikilo Vivian, went round the classes as she was very happy with the strict barrier measures in the various classes and also with the instrument put in place by UNICEF to help fight COVID-19 in the school.
The teachers themselves and the headmistress have understood the importance and the rules governing the prevention of COVID-19. We know that our children would be the most vulnerable given their ages. That is why we have insisted on the spacing of the children in the classrooms. I've personally gone through all the classrooms and I'm impressed because it is a child per desk.
The demonstration of how to use this hand watch instrument by pupils of this government English primary school Etugebe, which will be their daily routine in school. The resident representative of UNICEF, Jacques Paul, gave a message to the pupils on how to use these machines to avoid being contaminated.
Last Friday we have provided the 5 ministries in charge of education in Cameroon with equipment in order to contribute to one of the measures taken by the government to avoid the spread of COVID-19, and I'm here referring to hand washing with soap.
The headmistress of the school expressed her feelings of this instrument as she thanked the Secretary of State, the government, and the UNICEF of the good initiative.
We thank the Ministry of Basic Education and the UNICEF representative for the materials that they have given to help fight this COVID-19 pandemic. And they did demonstrate to us how to use the items.
With this collective help from authorities, the parents are also called upon to continue and double the effort at home to help fight the COVID-19 pandemic.
I'm satisfied for what I've seen. Everywhere we have passed, we have seen that all the school children are wearing masks, and also the teachers are in the same posture. So they are working so that this COVID virus has to stop in our level. We have some of them who were just frightened by the environmental aspect of Douala. But I will just say that it is not complicated when people are disciplined, and all of them are doing well. And for those who are hesitating to send their children to school, I would say that they are all ready to go to markets where people are many, to go to make shopping where people are many, to go to the burial places where people are many. Why are they against school today? I would just say that we have more measures taken at school than to the market where those people are going.
I've divided these children into 3 classes. So each class is having 21, and it's less than the 24 that the government said.
The high school section is not functioning because of the insecurity problem in it now. So the half 5 that they started, 3 came yesterday, but today everybody was in class.
Having children resume school this week amidst the COVID-19 featured to be amongst one of the most scary decisions taken by the state in handling the coronavirus threat, as formerly perceived by most parents, students and teachers. Above all odds, classes have systematically resumed across the 10 regions of the country with the strict respect of COVID-19 barrier measures. In today's Inter-Ministerial Video Conference held weekly, the committee meeting, chaired by the Prime Minister Joseph John Guti, took delight to applaud the efforts put in place by the Ministries of Education, school staffs, and the health departments in seeing that learners effectively begin brushing up their third-term lessons ahead of their exams amidst the COVID-19. Also revoked in course of today's Inter-Ministerial Cabinet meeting, the situation of Cameroonians stuck abroad as a result of the COVID-19 took top-line priority talks. The head of government outlined the need to boot mechanisms which should enable the aforementioned Cameroonians regain the country, while also outlining on the need to respect the barrier measures being the most appropriate solution to slowing the increasing curve of COVID-19 confirmed cases. Prime Minister Joseph John Guti called on the various departments, the Ministry of External Relations, headed by Lucien Belambela, to ensure that Cameroonians blocked abroad regain the Cameroonian territory in a third contingent segment. Besides this, the Prime Minister also called on the Minister of Public Health, Manaudo Malashi, to see into the putting in place of systematic centers, which would go a long way to ease the screening of suspected COVID-19 cases across the National Triangle. And to the Minister of Communication and the ministries in charge of education, the Prime Minister charged these collaborators to keep working towards preserving the lives of teachers, pupils and students in school as they end up the third term and take on the examinations. Welcome back, and that's what made top news this week. I'll begin with you, Fabrice Lena, National Communications Secretary for the Popular Action Party. Schools have resumed. It's true, Cameroon this far is receiving aid, international aid, notably from the United Nations, and the government insists barrier measures should be respected within campuses in a bid to preserve the health situation of pupils and students in examination classes. Do you say all these points would preserve the kids from the COVID-19 at the long run?
Well, thank you very much for that question. I would first of all like to appreciate the efforts of Cameroonians and the masses who have been abandoned by their purported government on their own. It is rather alarming that the government of Cameroon don't care much about its own citizens and prefer to put their lives in danger in a very critical moment where they are supposed to take the responsibility as the leaders of the country to ensure that students are really controlled in the midst of this pandemic. When we look at the measures that have been put in place by the government from the start of this pandemic, it has all been a total failure. A total failure because there have not been any massive testing to know exactly at the level of each subdivision, at the level of each division, at the level of each region, especially for the center and the littoral, where this pandemic is being spread at a geometric rate. And then we also discover that the different ministries that are in charge for the control, the management of the pandemic in Cameroon have failed woefully because they have not carried out any corresponding assistance measures. What we are seeing on ground is some sort of what we call charade and blasphemy of items that do not even go a long way to survive a small population of the people. When we look at the situation of the students, we begin to ask a question. Maybe the coronavirus of Cameroon is different from that of China, is different from that of Italy, is different from that of the United States.
How is the coronavirus situation of Cameroon to your view?
Like when I say different, because when at the beginning of this pandemic, we discovered that schools were closed when we had just 3 cases of coronavirus in Cameroon. And when we are at 5,000 plus, that is when schools are being asked to reopen. That is the first question mark. The second question mark is markets have been open since the beginning of this crisis up till now, and we begin to question the interaction between persons in a market, which is an open place for all persons, students, every kind of persons of all walks of life interact in the market because that's where they buy things, have been open since the beginning of this crisis. Nobody had ever gone to a TV station or a report or an interview to talk about the market, but they begin to talk about the schools. Now, talking about the schools, what have the government done so far in the past 3 months to contain the private school teachers that have been wallowing in abject poverty and abandoned to themselves since the schools have been boycotted? I think the secondary schools and primary schools have been registered under a particular ministry, and they are supposed to be followed up. And if the International Monetary Fund, friendly countries, individuals of Cameroon are giving money to the government, is for the government to accompany the private sectors, individuals and actors in order to jointly fight this pandemic.
Are you saying that the government is not yet accompanying the sectors you're
completely? The government is only taking care of itself, and the pandemic is managed more politically than a health crisis. It's being handled more politically, and to even achieve a political aim. The political goal of the pandemic in Cameroon is greater than the general objective of preventing Cameroonians from getting this virus.
Thank you so much. Let me get a view of Full Godfred, political analyst of the CPDM. Schools have resumed today. The statistics prove that Cameroon in just a couple of weeks may top 10,000 COVID-19 cases, but yet schools are opened and we have kids of examination classes who have resumed. There is no need for fear?
I will not, I don't know, maybe I'll come back to him.
Okay.
I think the fact that schools resume, it was a good and a very necessary decision that was taken by the government at this moment on time. Because even if some people would always criticize without giving any solution of what was to be done, maybe I always said they have their own Cameroon to create, where people will be flying, not walking.
Are you saying that everything is going
well? Everything
as the government handles the COVID-19? Everything is rosy?
So it is just a simple fact to see on the field. You have to look at these children when schools were closed. You see them in small markets selling granite, moving up and down. As the minister just said there, they were everywhere, no control. But at this moment, I don't know if, I always say the CRM people, they have their own country, which is not Cameroon.
Of the PAP.
You have to remind that I'm not of the CRM.
Lena is of the PAP, Popular Action Party. Yes.
Popular Action Party. That's good. He is not far from the others, because I think he is having his own bias. Yes, he has his own view in Cameroon, and I don't know if since the beginning of the school year, since these children went back to school, he has been moving along to see how these children are really respecting these measures. I think they have at least a certain place where they can give them instruction how to follow this measure. And I said, as I was saying in one other China, that these children are going to be messengers to their parents, because some people, they don't even know how far this pandemic is very dangerous. And I think the other day I was in one school here, just around this place in Mendong, at Mario there. I saw a delegation from the youth and civic education.
Which school? Private-owned school?
Private school. It was in private school.
Okay.
That was a private school, because if I want to talk about what is done in public school, they will tell me now that no, it's only the public school. No, these people, they came, they took their time, and they were teaching the children how to respect the measure. And by the way, even the teachers already, they are there like to sensitize this population, who is even, as we said in French, les porteurs sains, that they can distribute the illness without even themselves making the sick. And see that if now they are recadred, the only problem we'll be having with all the measures put in place by the government is from the house to school. And that's the time that we call for the parents to be more responsible.
Meaning that teachers have their own role to play, as well as parents.
And once these children are inside the school, I think if you see, they respect one child per bench, and all of them are having their mask. In front of each class, you will see a bucket and a savon where they can wash their hands. And I think government has taken a good decision and we have to salute, and we just have to accompany it, not to criticize without any solution.
Okay, let me get a view of Professor Tita Samuel Forn of the Cameroon's People's Party. You are the national chairman. What's your view about school resumption and kids getting back into classrooms in examination classes? Are they safe from this killer virus?
Let me start first by saying that the Cameroon children have suffered innocently a lot, and they have sacrificed a lot since 1990, 2000, 2010, and even up to date. And the coronavirus, the COVID-19, to me, should not be looked at as a political exercise.
Okay.
For politicians to come and make a lot of noise, because it gives room again for our innocent children to keep sacrificing. And what destiny do we have for these children of tomorrow? So I am of the opinion that the decision that the government took to allow these children come back to school, particularly examination class, because there must be room for continuity. If we say they should stop, how do we get ahead? There must be room for continuity. And in this case of continuity, we feel that the children should go back to school. And it is right, they've gone back to school. And if it were left to me again, my personal opinion, I would have said schools should all go back.
Fully resume.
Schools should all resume.
There is no fear.
Yes.
There's no
There is
fear.
no fear. No panic.
Why do you have the
thing is that
when the statistics keep increasing?
It keeps increasing because there is unnecessary fear. But if we can respect the necessary rules given out, I think it will drop.
How possible will kids in the primary school, for instance, be able to respect when even respecting orders given by teachers at times is not bread and butter? How do you think it's going to be possible if schools fully resume?
No, I am of the opinion as a teacher myself that you will not surrender to children that you are supposed to bring them up, because in every class there is a thing a teacher must understand. You have all sorts of people, rebels, all sorts of people inside. So you will control them in your own form in order to keep away that disease.
Okay. That's interesting to know. So let me get to you. Yes, I know you're itching to say something.
I wanted to...
You on your part, you have been trying to detect some of the flaws so far as controlling the health pandemic in Cameroon, notably in the school sector. What are those flaws you want to figure out?
Yeah, so I will first of all want to say that my co-panelists should not mix up a lot of things, and we should get straight what is straight. We are saying that the overall management of the COVID-19 pandemic in Cameroon by the government is a cacophony and a total failure. That is a reflection of the actual government in place that has failed the Cameroonian people. No doubt about that. Secondly, talking about school resumption, if the government gives its reasons for justifying examination class students from the primary to the university to write their examinations based on the fact that they had already collected the examination fees and charges for these students and children and pupils, it is normal, it's but normal to justify the money they've already collected. But if it is talking about relating the school resumption to effective management of the COVID-19 pandemic, I mean, that is hypocrisy. Because at the situation where we are, the government is saying the situation is complicated. That is the words of Ministry of Public Health in his tweet some days ago, that the situation in the country is complicated because the number is on the increase. We cannot make a correlation. It is not compatible that the number of contaminated persons is increasing and we say that the situation is controllable for school to resume. It means at a particular time, either you people are deceiving the Cameroonian people about the statistics you're given on daily basis, or we are not having the same coronavirus that is affecting other countries in the world in Cameroon. At the same time, we begin to ask questions. If the government is so confident about children going to school and coming back without contacting this disease, then it means that those who have been recorded to be dying of COVID-19 in the different hospitals might be questionable too. So what we are trying to say is this: the government is not transparent enough and not honest enough to give us the right information that we want to understand. We are not politicizing anything here. Let education be education. And if we want to talk about education, we in a period of pandemic and epidemic, we should distinguish between the education, its principles, and politics and its principles. What do we see the government officials doing? It is not officials of Ministry of Public Health, Ministry of Secondary Education and Primary Education that are carrying most of the activities in the school. It is rather Minat that is doing some of this work. Then we come to see a government of total confusion where people don't give responsibilities to people who are supposed to have that responsibility. That is what we are saying.
Who are those supposed to have the responsibility?
A ministry is supposed to be autonomous of the other.
That's the Ministry of Basic Education and the Ministry of Secondary Education and that of Higher Education.
Of course.
Okay.
And then they are supposed to work independent of Ministry of Territorial Administration. But sometimes you come to see a situation where it is an official of the Ministry of Territorial Administration that is carrying out actions of this education sector. In the recent outings of the different SDOs and DOs in the different localities
and is
of
it posing enormous problems? Has this posed enormous problems?
Yes, it has, because these people do not have what we call the expertise in that domain to give the information that is required or even carry out the actions that is required for the situation to be put under control. Okay. That is why we are saying that the government in place has failed the Cameroonian people. The government is in place has brought the Cameroon to its knees, to where it is, and as it has always failed in the previous crisis and the numerous crises that it has plagued us to, it has also failed in the COVID-19 pandemic. And we are always telling parents that sending these children in school to write their examinations, it is special grace of God, because we don't know whether the days ahead is going to be disastrous or it is going to be blissful. It is a question mark that is yet to be answered. So but the government is so confident. Why should the government be so confident when the numbers increasing?
Are you saying parents were to be indifferent to the call of the government for kids to go back to school?
It is the responsibility of citizens to obey the government. But when the government becomes incredible, the citizens also begin to doubt the words of the government officials, because it is not today that government officials have come out in the state TV to make pronunciations that have been debunked. Recently, we saw the Ministry of Secondary Education refusing a communique that was circulating, which was not so different from the different communiques signed at that same ministry, which makes the credibility of such an official state ministry and that ministry to be put in doubt. That is so questionable. How will you make a normal Cameroonian who is not in Yaoundé or Douala to believe in such information that does not correlate?
Thank you. I'll get back to you. Full Godfrey.
You know,
what about? I want you to start with this. What about the communication around this COVID-19 all? He mentioned the cacophony by the government. What about the communication?
I think there is nothing about the communication.
Which is faulty.
And everything is flowing normally. And please,
let him know.
Okay, it's okay. Go ahead.
If you want that,
you can scatter this place. Already have their.
So just allow me to go. Don't even just try to. Yes. So I think about the communication, everything is flowing very well. And whensoever you people invited, it's good because it's point of view. But what I will advise them is not to do what we call in French verbiage. The verbiage, just to speak without saying anything. Because if I can resume, I know we have many viewers if I can resume what he wanted to tell us here, first point, school should stop. No school, because there is a pandemic.
You are passing the message, not making
no, that's what you said. That's what you said. That's what you said. And all what you were saying is like to say no school because there is a pandemic. You understand? I think when you are talking to people, we are here to clarify the public, not to make them to fall back into darkness. You understand? For you, parents were to keep their children in the house because they are afraid of the pandemic. But I will answer you there by saying, government have not obliged any parent to send a child in school. That is, it was a flexibility system. For those who want to send their children, they can send. I'm coming because you see what the Catholic nation in Douala, they refuse to
let your children go to school.
Let the children go to school, and government put in place many measures. When I'm talking about flexibility, because in the beginning of this pandemic, we have the e-learning, and I think we have not stopped the e-learning. Schools that can go on with the e-learning, they can still go on, and they can keep those children at home. But for the fact, we see that there is no way to keep these children at home, because if you see what is happening, I don't know, maybe my co-panelist does not have children at home.
The increasing statistic shouldn't be parents, because that's what
the increasing statistic. Let me tell you about something about the increasing statistic. When they talk about the increasing statistic, you know that if you take a country where they test only 500 people, what do you, if they tell you that they have only 100 people that were contaminated, and a country where they test more than 10,000 people and they tell you that they have 200 people contaminated. I would like to know, so if you look at the statistics, you understand? Because in Cameroon now, there are many places where they have to make the test. And you see that as they are testing, that's how we have the number increasing, and it helps even the government to take care of those people who are there are special centers already put in place. If you can look at the one in Yassa and the one here at Oka, just here at Vogby, special centers to take care of these people. And when you see people talking like this, it's just to make Cameroonians to be afraid in such a way that they will think that the pandemic is something that came to be afraid. And as programs to go back tomorrow, and for them, it is going to sacrifice. I'm not the one to say this. I told you, if you want that, you should go that way. I'm very ready. Yes. So the pandemic has not announced it's coming, and we don't know when the pandemic will get finished, and we cannot sacrifice the education of our children because of the pandemic. COVID-19 is there. We have to learn to live with, and we have to know that if you want to sacrifice, maybe they are going to create their own country where it will be ruled by illiterates. If you want to sacrifice a country, sacrifice its education. And the measures, Cameroon is not, the government of Cameroon is not ready to sacrifice his education. And if you look at the measures, the arsenal of measures put in place by the Cameroon government, you will understand that there is nothing to be afraid of. And this message is going to the parents. Let them sleep well and know that their children will come back with their certificate right in all good condition as they were supposed to.
Thank you so much, Professor Tita Samuel Forn. Now let's come back. You got all the points and the views of Lena and as well of Full Godfred.
Yes.
Each words to say there.
Yes. I did talk of continuity, the need for continuity.
Okay.
And what I meant here was that COVID-19 is not politics.
That's it.
But politicians can act towards fighting against the disease.
It is a pandemic. And as a pandemic, it is the responsibility of all. It's not a question of saying the government. Who is the government? It's a pandemic. And as a pandemic, it's a situation for all to fight it. Everybody takes it as a responsibility to fight it. Then, when it comes to the question of continuity, as I said before, the nation must keep on. Under all circumstances, that's what I wanted to say. Under all circumstances, the nation has to keep going.
Keep going. That's it.
We will pass away, but Cameroon will continue.
Yes.
We will not pass away with Cameroon.
Yes.
As we pass away and continue, Cameroon continues, we therefore understand that under all circumstances, the education of the nation must be protected. The economy of the nation must be protected. You will not say, okay, because there is COVID-19, people should close their shops forever and stay in their houses because they are afraid of death.
That's it.
People should close schools forever and stay at their homes because of COVID-19. There is need for continuity. And in a nation, there can be no continuity without education. There can be no continuity without the economy being protected. So I want to put to my friends that the idea of bringing back the children to school is good enough, sound enough. And again, allowing certain functions of the economy to take place, to continue, is sound enough. Because you cannot close the economy and think that the nation will exist. You cannot close education and think that you are building a nation. You are just building rubbish.
That's it.
Thank you, Fabrice Lena. Let me get to you. This week, we as well had Prime Minister Joseph John Guti, who chaired an inter-ministerial committee meeting with close collaborators, the ministers in charge of education, the basic, secondary and higher educations, also that of communication in the country and that of external relations. We would recall he charged these respective ministers to keep on the fight against the COVID-19. For instance, ensure the Ministry of External Relations to let flow Cameroonians stuck abroad as a result of the COVID-19 in the education sectors to ensure that the schools are preserved from the COVID-19. All those points raised by the PM, satisfactory enough to say there is a possibility for Cameroon to brave the COVID-19?
Well, when you look at the status of Cameroon in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic vis-a-vis other African countries, you discover that one of the countries in Africa that its own situation is alarming and cause for concern is Cameroon. And we understand that this situation prevails because of the current political system, regime, and the political structure, organization that we find ourselves in. Yeah, when you look at interministerial meeting of the PM, there are certain elements that we like to reiterate here. There is Cameroon, there is this issue of personality cult in Cameroon, where everything that is being done to help Cameroonian people seems to be a special grace from the head of state. Now, everything seems to be like Cameroonians are supposed to be grateful to the Prime Minister, to the different ministries, or to the head of state for doing things that it is a responsibility, duties for them to do to Cameroonians. What they are doing, it is first of all on delayance, first. Secondly, they are wasting a lot of time. Thirdly, they are using taxpayers' income. Fourthly, we don't have accountability for those actions of the government because we have had several ministerial conferences by the PM. Now they say these measures have been taken. As days unfold, nobody is giving an account of how those measures are being realized by the government or not. Like we are seeing in other countries, like in Ghana, for example, how from the smaller units of administration right up to the level of the government or the prime ministry, day-to-day report is given on government achievements and shortcomings on the fight against the pandemic. But our situation is what? Government sit on the round table conference, allocate huge amount of budget for that conference, carry out measures. At the end, the measures is being announced in the TV, media propaganda is being carried on it, and we don't drive home any message. Now, this is the problem. And now there is a lot of wastage of resources to that effect. And this wastage of resources is affecting the masses, because actually the government of Cameroon has succeeded to put class stratification of the civil servants and the government political appointees that are in their comfortable zone and sees nothing wrong with whatever thing that is being carried out by the government in Cameroon.
Now, without cutting you, you're questioning the accountability of funds by the government in line with the COVID-19 management in the country. What about the 1.7 billion of the Solidarity Fund and the initiatives taken by the government to ensure that the 10 regions become autonomous as far as screening of suspected COVID-19 cases are concerned? Are those not steps already taken by the government, or it's not enough?
Hermine Ilouga, I would really say that for a state like Cameroon, with all its resources and oil wealth, with all the income, it is really appalling that the present government in place has dragged Cameroon to a serious economic crisis. When we look at the contributions of different Cameroonian individual business economic operators, when we look at the contributions of international friendly countries and United Nations economic agencies or financial institutions, we discover that when you sum all this amount of money that has entered to the government coffers, you begin to ask the question, now, can we differentiate between those contributions and what the government is propagating as the head of state's income for the fight against COVID-19, which is 1 billion. And when you want to look at it vis-a-vis the population of Cameroon, it cannot solve any situation. And then, where are the income that has been contributed for the other people? What has been done so far? We look at how ridiculous the government made itself in front of local authorities of giving buckets to people, and then the people reject it and say, no, what is the meaning of this?
It's not enough.
It's not enough. Okay. Government is not like government of Cameroon like giving people fish to eat. But instead of training your citizens such that they can fend for themselves, that is what the people want. At the beginning of this crisis, when the Prime Minister took the first 13 measures, civil society organizations, political parties and individuals criticized and said that the Prime Ministry were supposed to put a budget that could have accompanied, for example, let me take the education sector. The private school teachers were supposed to have a budget that will help them during the moment that they are in confinement to at least pay rent, pay water bills, pay light bills. But the government did completely nothing into that effect. And how do you expect these people to survive?
Thank you.
And you come today and just take them.
Yes, finally, I don't know. It is like you allow this man, I don't know if he's coming to preach, I don't know what he's preaching. And sometimes when I look at him, it is like you just imported him. He's not living in Cameroon.
Like he's discovering what...
Yes, because he is absent. He's completely absent in Cameroon. All what is
just pass your
message around him is like
pass your message.
Can you prove it?
Yes,
pass your message.
Distribution of the science
because you see,
in 360 subdivisions of the country effective.
It was effective.
Go.
And it was effective, and I believe even the local authorities receive, and I think we have the how do we call the remerciement?
Personality calls.
They thank the government for what? The head of state for what?
He has done.
You understand?
Very, very
so,
poor.
And you can see the collective work, when they talk about interministerial meeting, it was not one ministry, as he wanted to select here, like territorial administration was supposed to do like this, and maybe it will be their own government. For now, we are there. And I think we are doing collective action. And when we are talking about this thing, you can count the number of times he's just talking about government. I think it is a war. As the President of the Republic said, it is a war, and it is a collective war. And before being collective, it is individual.
Yes.
And who is government? Government is you. Government is me. And when you are everything, it is like you people are just using this opportunity to politicize everything and to talk about how government is doing this.
Cameroon have nothing. It's a poor public sector economy. I'm telling you that private individuals in Cameroon don't have
when you are talking,
yes,
I don't talk.
Sorry.
So please, because next time I'm going to do as you are doing, and you see how it you go.
Right on.
So what I was saying is, the government is doing enough. If you see at this level, when the Prime Minister came out the other day, he talked about the special centers put in place, like that of Yasa and Oka. And you have some other private health centers that have been equipped, and very soon they are going in the treatment of this pandemic. So and you see measures are taken day by day, and the government is doing everything. The Minister of Secondary Education should implement, should give instruction for secondary education schools to respect this measure. And when if you go into those schools, you will see that those measures are respected. And as I just said, there are some groups from Ministry of Youth and Civic Education who are going down to the field to instruct these children and to tell them how far the measures are very important to do. But if there are some Cameroonians who cannot see, that's why I said they are important.
Thank you so much. Let me get your view before we turn up to wrap today's edition of Reflection. Cameroon's head of state, President Paul Biya, has also slashed the 2020 budget for this year. Respect to the COVID-19, would say the pandemic keeps affecting the economy of the country, Professor Otita. And it's to raise eyebrows.
Yeah, before I get ahead,
you want to bounce back?
Permit me to say something a bit here.
Yes, swiftly.
You see, all I can see in this land of ours is that politicians work with a lot of bias. And as they work with a lot of bias, they do not understand that they need to come out and tell the people what they have been able to do before getting the mandate of the people so that they can do more. They only want to criticize and give a bad name to a dog in order to kill it.
What should politicians do?
I want to see that they also come out and tell the people what they can possibly do in order to have the mandate of the people. Now, why do I say this? You will understand that we keep talking of government, whereas we would have come out to say, politician A, politician B has done this, and this area, the roads are going this, the COVID-19 has been handled in this form. This, I mean, we now can see that solutions are coming from everybody, and that's what we call government. Because I always maintain that what we call opposition is in the parliament. And after the parliament or the Senate, you are all Cameroonians out to build Cameroon for the good of everybody. After the parliament or the Senate, you are all brothers for the good of Cameroon. So, whatever decision the head of state has taken in relation to the question you've just asked,
to slash the budget,
I perfectly feel that it is correct. If only it will serve the purpose and to make sure that Cameroonians fight this COVID-19 properly for the good of all citizens, than the much money that would have gone to a few at the expense, the detriment, I should put it, the detriment of some citizens or most of the citizens. So I think the head of state decision to me is perfect.
Let me get your view, Lena, on the 2020 budget, would say, by the head of state, which has been slashed completely.
Well,
a huge quarter.
Yeah, I still want to make a small point on this issue that people think that Cameroonians hate Cameroon or they don't like the government. This is a wrong notion. We are all Cameroonians. We love our country and we're patriotic.
Nobody has said
on the contrary, those who don't love this country are those who feel that the resources of this country belongs to them alone, power belongs to them alone, and other people's ideas do not matter in the construction of the country. Because in a country where the public sector is more empowered than the private sector becomes vulnerable and does not have even the power to take any decision. That is the problem in Cameroon. When you look at other countries, let me take for example Nigeria or Senegal, you discover that the private sector have the capacity to compete with the public sector because the government allows the private sector to have a certain degree of autonomy in terms of investment, in terms of decision making, in terms of global construction of the economy.
Please, I would like to retaliate this man. When
this pandemic started, opposition political parties, we of Stand Up for Cameroon movement, we came out with a document and proposed to mayors. Most of them read it, saw very good ideas of how to manage the pandemic at the level of the subdivisions.
And it has not been applied.
Exactly. We came with a prototype ventilator of Stand Up for Cameroon. I have the video if you want, I can give you. Some technicians and medical experts of our movement came up and we proposed it to government officials.
In one word, what is the key solution? In one word.
So you see that it is the government that is discouraging the Cameroonian opposition and civil society to collaborate.
Asking the solution.
Open its doors.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Open the doors.
One last word before we close.
Yes, one last word. I don't know why he is crying. The President of the Republic said this is a collective fight.
Okay.
This is a matter of death or life. And everybody should join the hands. Either you are from any party to come on and fight the common enemy.
Okay.
And I think some parties have been doing that. So your call
is for all the other parties.
For all the other parties to follow the trend.
Thank you so much.
Not to just sit and be criticizing.
Thank you so much, Full Godfrey. Thank you all. Fabrice Lena, National Communications Secretary of the Popular Action Party, Professor Tita Samuel Fon, National Chairman of the Cameroon's People's Party, and you, Full Godfrey, political analyst of the CPDM party. Would recall today's edition specialized on Cameroon surviving the COVID-19. Anyway, take good care of yourselves. We'll see you next week. Have a lovely weekend.
May God be with you.
That is your program.
Mama said I cry.
Infotv,